Imagine if you could listen to 1 million B2B sales professionals and then you can hear the best things that these sales professionals are saying. Would you want to take those things and apply them? Of course you would. And my friends over at Wingman did exactly that. And their CEO, Shruti Kapoor, is going to tell us what those 3 things are today in this episode and how you could go about succeeding. Good idea, huh? Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode here on TSE TV, we're going to talk to the CEO and founder of an amazing company called Wingman, Shruti Kapoor. And Shruti is doing some amazing things, man. I keep emphasizing amazing because it's mind-blowing. Not because of the simple fact that they sponsor our podcast. I actually use the tool and I like it. And this is one of the reasons why I love having her on the show, because they've analyzed these phone calls. And I'm telling you, man, and if you could listen to what some of the best sellers are saying, wouldn't this just help you to be able to perform at a whole nother level? That's exactly what's going on in this episode. And it's like gold. And I want you to be able to listen, take these things, and actually apply them. So let's go ahead and dive into that episode. Welcome to the show, Shruti.
Thanks so much, Donald. Great to be here.
Of course. I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit and get some insights from you on this topic. But before we dive into all the fun stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Sure. Currently I wear the hat of being the CEO founder of Wingman. Wingman is a company that looks at sales calls data to provide overall analytics to sales leaders and sales teams. But I haven't done this for a long time. I actually started my career more than a decade back in finance. I was an investment banker at Morgan Stanley, and then, through varied things, this has been quite a journey, and I'm very excited to be where I am right now.
Well, fantastic. I mean, I'm excited to have you because especially when you come with that knowledge from the financial banking world, it seems like you have a lot of the analytical thinking that could help us, especially in the sales arena. And many sales reps that I speak with, they miss that portion. They just go off of the feeling. This is what I feel is good. And it's like, even though your feelings could be good, let's look at the data and see what's actually really happening. And so I'm looking forward to that. So when we were talking, you mentioned that you've analyzed over 1 million minutes of B2B sales call. That's a lot of conversation there.
That's right. And that's all from 2020.
From 2020, just 2020.
Just
Holy
2020.
moly. So, I mean, there's probably, and I think we could probably, if we had time, we probably could say, the top 100 things that we learned from that. And there's probably so much, but we want to bottle it down to the top 3 things. What would you say the top 3 things are from analyzing those over 1 million minutes? And then what we can do, if you're okay with that, take a few minutes and just discuss each of them. Does that sound fair enough?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Sounds like a plan. So, I think the first thing that we learned was, call volumes itself, right? They saw a big dip during the March-April time period, but they've definitely come back up, right? And we're seeing that, especially for these type of video meetings. The second thing that we've learned is, while people were in a position where things were frozen for a period of time, things have really bounced back to pretty much where they were in February. And one of the biggest reasons, even when people were not buying, wasn't frozen budgets. That was a pretty big surprise to me. And then the third thing that we've learned is prospects love to talk about their kids. And I think sales reps need to catch on.
All right. So talking about their kids, you said the different types of objections or blockers, and then the call volume. And you said, just like how, well, let's talk about the call volumes. What would you say call volumes were pre-COVID before March from what you're learning?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we saw with the call volumes was that during March, right, They dropped almost to half of where they were, right? And the biggest dip actually came from different types of phone calls, right? So
Hmm.
people were, either those are mostly, either people doing a cold call or people are just generally trying to do a quick catch up to maybe unblock a deal that was blocked. And the interesting thing was that, that completely dropped off initially. And I think part of the reason definitely was that there wasn't availability of the good numbers because, people were working from home, so you couldn't use the desk phone numbers that you had been using. And then we have seen a revival for sure, but that's actually one thing where we haven't seen 100% revival yet. We are seeing it come back to maybe around 85% of what it was in February, but it's not gone back to 100%. And, I think part of the reason is that there is definitely a deficit of data because of, desk phone numbers no longer being valid or available.
Yeah. So not being able to get the right, since I'm not sitting at the desk anymore, you have to figure out another way to get a hold of me. So that number, that call volume drops. What I saw from my experience is that some people, and this is not all the cases, some people we saw had the like a VoIP phone. So some of the
Mm-hmm.
companies were routing the phone numbers, but this goes to show, obviously, not all of them are in that same situation. Some of them just maybe just have that desk number totally, and it's not a VoIP phone, and they can't get the numbers routed. That's kind of, and then that's probably a good thing for companies to realize, like, that bottleneck these days. You know what I mean? Like, it's that holds them back. I mean, what you guys know the data, so if there's anything else you guys have on that, or any ideas?
I think you and I, probably speak to or sell to more sales teams and salespeople,
Yeah.
right, for whom the redirect might work well. But of course, a lot of our customers don't, right? So if they're selling to other types of teams, which are more internal facing, then, it really isn't a priority for companies to get them necessarily back on the line. And then, the other surprising thing we saw was that while there was a significant dip in the phone number, in the phone call related volumes, the volumes for actually video calls, stayed more or less stable and in fact even increased. And so, what that leads me to believe is that on a per deal basis, right? While you might not be able to reach out to many different people, but for the people that you're reaching out to, you're probably having more follow-up conversations, more scheduled type of calls. And that probably just goes on to show that, sales cycles are longer with many more touch points right now due to COVID and due to people being remote as well.
Interesting. So yeah, I guess going back to this thought now, if you were leading a sales team, well, no, you're not. If you are leading a sales team, what are some of the things you're telling your sales reps as a result of this understanding with call volumes?
I think for us, what we're telling them is one, if you can't find, if you can't find them on the phone, then you definitely have to look for other sources. And so what we've been doing a lot more of is voice and video messages in our outreaches, right? And I think that kind of replaced the voice note that you would have otherwise left on the phone, you can today leave on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So we've been experimenting a lot more with that. And I
What are
think
your
the second
findings
thing that
on
we're
that? Sorry, what are your findings on that voicemail on LinkedIn?
So I mean, of course, I don't have as big a data set for that, but I think it's definitely been a kind of a place which we've been able to use for unblocking deals. We haven't seen as much success using it purely as as a first touch point. But I think where there's been some conversation and then using it to unblock, I think that's worked well.
Yeah, it's my understanding of it too. It's a great supplementer, and it's a novelty to some people because some of them they still don't know about it yet. So all of a sudden they're like, "How did this person send me a voice message on LinkedIn?" And they're like, "Well, how did you do that?" And then I'm explaining how I did that. But at least it leads to the conversation, or it's bringing them back to having that discussion. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get a hold of them. So that's a good point. So you said that, and then the
Yeah.
second point, were you saying video?
Yeah, so we've been using video. We've tried many different things on video ourselves. I think the interesting thing is, of course, since we sell to salespeople and sales teams, right? Anything new works for a period of time, but also stops working really fast. Right, the novelty factor wears out really quickly with salespeople, because what we've seen is when we initially, like in the first week that we sent out videos and videos was relatively new, we got a lot of views. And it was funny, like some of our videos got like more than 20 views. And then we realized that it was because they were sending it internally to other team members saying, hey, we should try this too. But, that didn't necessarily mean that we got a response.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this omni-channel approach so interesting, right? Where you're doing like if you can do phone, you're doing your text email, you're doing your video emails, and then you hit them with like LinkedIn. And for us, we're seeing that effect working great, where we do given a multiple touch point. And even, I mean, sometimes the snail mail could work, but I use the snail mail when, especially in these days, when we have the data. Right. So if I talk to a receptionist and they say, yeah, the person comes in once a week, I'll get them the mail. Then I know I could send it to that particular corporate address or whatnot. And in some way they were still getting that. And also utilizing emails through, sending gifting in that way as well. But anyway, I like that. That's funny though. People sharing that video internally. All right. So we talked about the call volume. Anything else that we should know about call volume?
No, I think those were the main observations. And actually, the way this whole exercise started for us was our customers came to us and said, of course, during the pandemic period, we were all talking about how everybody is dealing with it. And then they came back and said, listen, there's a few things I'm curious about. One is, I don't know whether my reps are making as many calls. And it's okay if they are not, but I just want to know how different is it from the pre-COVID days? And, maybe I want to put them on other interesting projects because I know anyways reach rates are going to be poor. Right. The other thing that they were curious to know in some cases was, is it okay for them to actually, actively talk about COVID or work from home or, internet issues and things like that. Right. And then the third thing that they were curious about was, listen, everybody is telling me that, this deal is not going through or it's not closing this quarter. Is it really going to help if I maybe change my pricing or, gave a much longer free trial period, right? Or should I be, instead focusing on creating ROI calculators? Right. So that was kind of a question that a lot of teams were asking us. And so we actually did, we definitely worked with some of the teams to help answer the questions based on their own data. But then we thought it would be interesting to just look at this as a whole and see what we get, because I'm sure like other sales teams are curious about the same thing. So we then started looking at least some of the key objections and seeing what's really coming up.
Yeah. That's, that's I mean, I guess going into that objection part, those blockers, the idea of the pricing. I just think sometimes salespeople, even on the good days or bad times, we're always going to want to, not all salespeople, a lot of salespeople just want to go back to the pricing was the issue. But I think you mentioned this idea of ROI calculator or another way to be able to give more value to it. I think that's where the true things lie. But the can we lead into going into those blockers then, or some of those objections that you guys discovered from analyzing the calls?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we started looking at was of course, are people talking more about budgets, right? Like, and budgets in the sense of I have a budget freeze or I have no budget, or like in that kind of tone. And other related things, like are they talking about maybe having layoffs at their company or about needing to go back to the CFO for approvals today, right? So we saw, we wanted to know whether that was a real concern, because like you said, a lot of times people don't trust salespeople when they come back and say, this is a budget issue, or, people are asking for a discount, or it's a pricing concern. And we definitely saw, right, like this number actually jumped 3 to even almost 4x, during April to July period, right? So before that, if you look at overall calls, we had maybe only in 0.5% of the calls, people were talking about these things in Jan and Feb. But, in April to June, we saw this number, this happening in, more than 1.5% or 2% of calls, right, which was pretty stark if you look at the baseline. And so, that was clear that, people were getting some pushback there. And then the question that we asked was, listen, if people are talking about budget and the negative sentiment, right, how are sales reps really responding to it, right? Like, are they talking more about discounts, or, is it going to be more around timing, or is it going to be more around ROI? And then what we saw was that, yes, of course, like you said, right, like discounts is something that people always talk about, right? So even in Jan and Feb, right, roughly in 2% of the calls, people were talking about discounts, right? And roughly half of that, or actually slightly more than half of that was reps, leading with a discount or talking about discount before the customer did. But what we saw during the period, while this number increased, right, it wasn't such a stark increase. It went from 2% to 3%, right? And the split between customer and rep on the topic also didn't change much, right? Which meant that it wasn't that suddenly, customers were saying, give me discount, discount, discount. It was, that balance almost continued, right? Like it was slightly more, maybe 60% of the times it was reps initiating the conversation on discount. And so what we then saw was, what about ROI, right? So ROI wasn't discussed as often as discounts, no surprises there. But then, when we look at the data in June and July, that number had actually doubled, right? And the interesting thing was that it wasn't necessarily the customers were bringing it up much more. Mm-hmm. Yes, the customers were bringing it up much more. But it was actually a lot of times it was the reps that were initiating that discussion, right? So like roughly 60-70% of the time, the reps were talking about ROI first in a call. Which I thought was pretty interesting too.
Huh. Yeah, so it's like I guess the reps are stipulating because of the timing, this time period that things are rough, that they have to bring that up.
Yeah. And I think it was also because when CFOs come in as a stakeholder in the decision process, in the buying process, it kind of automatically triggers that discussion much more than it otherwise does. Right? Like I remember last year speaking to some customers, some buyers, and asking them, hey, for the tools that you buy, what is the, how do you look at the ROI, or how often do you even go back and check it? And, the answer I would get was, engagement is the new ROI. We don't really check that, but if we know that people are using the tool, that's good enough for us. But clearly, that seems to have changed during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, idea there with that concept that, they don't go back to do the research on it. We just want to make sure people are using it. And I think sometimes we have this preconceived notion as sales rep that I guess to back up, do you think that it hurt those deals? Those deals was hurt when sales reps were talking more about the ROI first, or if it's customer led, does that make a difference?
So honestly, I didn't dig into that aspect of the data. Right? Maybe I'll have that answer for you the next time we speak.
That's good.
But I think that this was definitely driven by all of the conversation around budget freezes and the general downward mood.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you were to recap, or what would be the takeaway you would give to your sales reps understanding this information now?
So I think I would definitely, one, be asking them to ask about the decision makers involved in the process early on, right? And if they find out that there is going to be someone from the finance team, right, on the discussion, I would definitely suggest to them to put out ROI have a ROI calculation that they can show. Put that even as a slide if they're sending them some sort of a deck. And I think that for companies that are trying to decide between, what pricing changes they need to make around this period, at least from what we saw, the longer trial periods didn't quite help, right? What helped was either being able to show value or being able to at least commit to a reduced price for a longer period of time.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's it's a good way of doing it, as opposed to, like, and I've seen it with, well, I guess go back to the idea of the usage. Sometimes customers, and I've done it myself, where I've said, give me more time with the solution, but typically you give me more time, you give me a month with it, I'm still not going to get the stuff done. It's really comes back down to the fact that, am I using it, and am I seeing value? If I'm seeing worth from it, then so be it. So it's not the extend our trial to 6 months, like, give us a test run. If the value is there, then the person will take advantage of it. So
yeah, and I think on the same point, right, like what happens sometimes is when you get a tool for free for a long period of time, you are also somewhat less committed to doing the evaluation seriously. And, if you don't invest time in it, sometimes you don't get the value out of it.
Yeah. And then they say it doesn't work.
To be. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't work. Like, no, it doesn't work. You don't work. All right. The last point here is about, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I think that the last point on the objection piece was that we also saw a very stark increase in people talking about timing, right? Like people basically saying this is a bad time, maybe you should talk next quarter or maybe end of the year. And this is definitely a big dramatic jump, right? So this actually was a jump bigger than the discount jump that we saw. So it went from, somewhere around 0.7% of the calls, people talking about timing as a concern, to, at its peak in July, close to 2.5% of the calls, people
Wow.
are talking about this. So, I think the takeaway for me and for the teams that we work with there was to say, your reps have to just resign to the fact it's going to be longer sales cycles, and they have to make sure that they pull up their socks and do the follow-up. Because especially for a lot of reps where they're used to shorter sales cycles of, less than a month, when things like this happen, deals just kind of go into a black hole.
Yeah, that's the sad part. But I think if you prepare for it, I did a webinar recently on ways that they can shorten the sales cycle. A couple different things salespeople could take advantage of. But what I've seen is being able to, one, like you said, understand those objections beforehand, and then obviously give them those, going with getting the decision maker in sooner. And then also the idea of, the value, if you can build value quicker with the decision maker, even if they give them an opportunity to experiment with it. I like to say, I like to give opportunities without necessarily reducing the price, if that makes sense. So it's like, okay, I'm very big on our money back guarantee. I've never had to do it in our business. So when we do a training, I'll tell someone sometime, if it feels they necessarily need it, like, listen, we give you a money back guarantee. Let's figure out some criteria that you want to judge it on to see if it's going to be effective. Well, are my sales reps improving? Are they improving in this particular thing? Great. What's a good time frame for that? Well, great. So let's say 2 months. If you do it for 2 months and you don't see any type of improvement, then clearly something with our training didn't work. So I'll give you money back then at that point. But then now you're giving them I guess like a parachute in case something doesn't work for them. And yeah, I never had to do it, but I don't reduce the price for that. But I think the sales reps, because I think when it looks back on sales, it's all about mitigating the risk. When those the decision makers come in, how can I mitigate the risk that if they do make a decision that they're not going to get they're going to see the great results from it. And I think sellers going with that mindset now, it's going to help them tremendously. And maybe as a team discussing what are some things we can do without dropping our price. So
Absolutely. Now that makes sense.
yeah. The last piece here, you talked about small talk. So small talk increase. People love talking about their kids, you're saying. Kids and pets, is that what you discovered?
Well, I should go back and run the data on kids, on pets. I think, what was interesting is that, of course, people are always hesitant to talk about personal stuff, right? And especially to bring up personal stuff as the sales rep, right? Like, I think if the person on the other line says, hey, sorry, I need to attend to my kid, you're perfectly fine. But you definitely don't expect the sales rep to come and say, sorry, I was attending to the kid and that's why I was late for a couple of minutes, right? So we kind of see the same thing, right? So we've definitely seen that, prospects have gotten a lot more comfortable talking about kids. So it's showing up, 50% more than it used to pre-COVID. But what is interesting is that sales reps don't seem to have picked up on it, right? So we see still them not initiating the topic as much. My hypothesis, of course, is one, like I said, maybe they're just not comfortable bringing up a personal topic. I think the second is, of course, it's possible that a lot of times the reps are younger people who might not have kids. And so maybe they just don't know how to handle that situation.
Interesting. Yeah. Like, so you have these young BDRs that don't get that. But yeah, it's interesting. But I'm also fascinated with the fact that more reps, and I think that brings a good bonding, though, the ones that do bring it up and do have the children, that they're having the customers is having that empathy towards it because they're doing the same thing. They're being a business professional, but they're also being a teacher. Because now they're teaching the kids in the next room, dining room table, about how to do fractions that they don't remember how to do.
Absolutely.
Makes a unique bonding. So the key takeaway to that is, if a sales rep doesn't have kids, is it just more of having empathy towards it, or bringing it up sooner, or what are some of the things you're seeing from this information?
So I think one is definitely having more empathy towards it and not being scared of the topic, which I think some people are. And I think the second is that there actually is an opportunity to weave it in interesting ways, right? Like one of the things that we've been thinking about, and we should probably execute on this sooner than later, is when you're sending someone like a one-sheeter or something, right? Like you could create a fun version of it that they could actually print out and give to their kids for coloring or something, right? Like you could actually create like interesting pamphlets that could also be like kid-friendly.
What the heck? I never thought about that. That is so smart. Because there is what's that company called? One of my friends works at Citrix. So what Citrix did, their HR department, I saw she posted on social media, they sent out a packet. This was just to the employees altogether, but it was a company being that thoughtful to say, here are some things that you could do at home. And I think they did have some stuff for the kids as well, but it makes so much sense. Like, I actually was more for adulting. It was like the adult coloring book. Because they recognize you're at home and they want to just make you feel comfortable and know that we care for you. But it was HR. But that translates so well. If somebody did it to me, if say you had a conversation with me, and I have like a 1-year-old, and then you sent me, you're sending me or some information, a case study, but then you sent that as well. Like, hey, Donald, here's a wingman outline coloring thing so your kid can color. That would be like, boom. Or even if it's a case study that you cartoon case study, the prospect had some phone listening, and then then they saw an increase in their performance, and the kid was able to color that in. That would be awesome.
Why not?
You gave me an idea. I'm gonna try it. Awesome.
I better make sure that I do it myself too. I haven't yet rolled it out.
That's a fun thing. So but overall, I mean, understanding that it is I guess the biggest for me from this, understand that it is a topic that people are going to bring up, understand it is a situation that people are all having. Even if the kids are going back to school, they still have life has totally been adjusted. But if I could talk about if they talk about their kids, be personable enough to include that in my next meeting with them, or being aware of that. And people love talking about their kids and their dogs, so and their pets. So that way they can get in, I guess, connected to me on a deeper level and know that I care for them, because it's not something that affecting our deal, but it's their kid or it's their cat. But the fact that I bring it up in our next conversation shows that I paid attention and that I'm invested in you just as much as, I'm invested in you checking out our product. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, if there's I wish we could go on forever. There's so much more on this topic, but if there's one major advice, one major piece of takeaway you want folks to walk away with from this conversation, what's that one major piece of advice?
Just keep listening to your customers. You will learn a lot more than you thought you would.
Awesome. Just keep listening to your customers. And I brag about Wingman all the time, and we have a webinar coming up as well. So if some folks are listening to this, I want them to come back and check down below and see the link. But we have a webinar you and I are going to be doing, and talking about some more data points. And if you are fascinated by this, we'd love to have you all come and check out that webinar and learn how you can improve your B2B selling. But if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, and I think on the webinar, if they have any interesting questions that they would like to ask off the data, I think they should definitely shoot it to you. We could, try and dig into some of those things. And yeah, the best way to reach out to me, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, Shruti Kapoor, and then my email ID, of course, is shruti@trywingman.com. Awesome. Happy to hear from all of you.
Well, we'll go ahead and we'll put that information back in the show notes. Want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and for bringing your wonderful insights. We truly appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Donald. Lovely speaking with you.
Same to you, Shruti. That was Shruti Kapoor, the CEO of Wingman. And if you want to connect with Shruti, you can find all of her information down below. You can also go ahead and connect with her on LinkedIn. She has a lot of great information there as well. And you can also just check out the company, trywingman.com. I'm a big fan of Wingman. I use the tool, as I mentioned earlier, and it is amazing. I want you to also take the advice that she shared today and apply it to your life. We want you to succeed. We really want you to perform better. Now, speaking about performing better, I want you to make sure to check out our friends over at Pipedrive. Pipedrive is giving the TSE community an amazing offer. They're giving you 14-day trial typically, but they extended that to 30-day trial of their system. And then Pipedrive is also giving you 25% off the first 3 months. You can't beat this stuff, man. And then you got Wingman over here. Wingman, they're giving you some amazing stuff as well. And I absolutely love the tool. As I've been bragging about, I brought the CEO on the show because I like it. And you can see from today that the information that they have is just golden. Imagine if you're a sales rep or you have that on your day-to-day level. Mind blown, right? Check them all out. As always, I want you to succeed. I want you to find more of those ideal customers. I want you to know what to say when you reach out to them. I want you to be able to close more deals. But most importantly, I want to challenge you each and every single day to go out and do big things. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If you enjoyed the content, I ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, that thumbs up at the bottom right-hand corner. Also, to make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. This way, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest sales strategies, latest tools, and things that are going to help you to not only find more prospects, but to close more deals. Thanks so much.